Yeah, yeah, yeah. I won't lose it all if I fall apart. I just hit up God with my calling.
Good evening, everyone. We're gonna get started. So we're back on Bida'S pod. I got some exciting stuff for you guys this month as well. Wanted to introduce the brand new theme that we will be tackling this month. Honestly, I was kind of torn. I think February, for many reasons, is very special and particular for a lot of people. There's a lot of things to look forward to. There's a lot of things that are symbolic, I would say, in the month of February. And I was kind of torn in terms of what exactly I was going to dedicate this month to. And in the end, I decided to have the theme revolving around relationships, and more specifically, romantic relationships. Some of you can obviously tie it to Valentine's Day that is already fast approaching. That is one of the reasons, particularly, why I wanted to tackle it. But I think just in our generation, it's kind of a dicey subject and one that needs to be addressed rather thoroughly. And also, I think for us believers, it's important to shine the wisdom of God in all of that and ensure that we are approaching it for the right reasons, in the right way as well. And that's essentially what I wanted to tackle and address during this month. Each Sunday, we're going to have some great topics of discussion. We're starting off tonight. As you guys might have noticed, I have a different game in the background. So we got Mario Kart playing in the background. Just wanted to change it up a little bit. Don't pay no mind too much to what's going on in the background. Really just the subject at hand is what we will be diving into the most. And we'll jump into the subject that we have at hand for today. For tonight, I wanted to speak specifically about singleness. Singleness, whether it be a blessing or a curse, that's a little bit what we're going to be tackling tonight. And I think it's a very important subject to address because, especially in our day and age, we are so drawn towards being in a relationship that we kind of perceive being single as something bad, something to avoid, and things of that nature. And it can be challenging to navigate through. It can be very difficult for some folks to know how to approach being single. I wanted to give a little bit of wisdom with regards to that subject, address it also from a biblical standpoint and some of the wisdom that we can draw from the Bible. I will say, because we are talking about the theme of relationships during this month, I will say from my experience as well in scripture, we don't have an extensive playbook, I would say, in terms of how to approach relationships. And it can be very challenging for some folks, especially Christians who want to approach the topic of relationship in a God-fearing way, or in a way that ensures that we are obeying God and putting Him on the forefront. However, I think from some of the case-by-case situations that we see through the lives of different Bible characters, we can definitely draw some wisdom from what they did, what they didn't do, things of that nature, and also put things into context. I think we can also gain some understanding in terms of what the Lord wants for us and how the Lord wants us to approach relationships. And so I think starting with singleness, that's what we're going to be tackling first. Now, I think if we throw it back all the way to the beginning, meaning in Genesis, the creation of man and women, for those who are familiar with the story of the creation, Adam was created first out of the two and was placed in a world where, creation was already, animals, organisms, bodies of water, all of that was already created, was already put in place. And God kind of created this perfect space for man to operate. And it wasn't until, I think, chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken, in Genesis, that either chapter 3 or chapter 2, please correct me if I'm wrong, where the Lord Himself said, it's not good for man to be alone. I'm not going to dive too deep in terms of the choice of language, whether God was saying this specifically to men Or was he using kind of a general term for human beings, that it's not good for human beings to be alone? I personally have not done any extensive studies in terms of interpreting that particular section to be able to give you guys an accurate answer as to whether or not God was speaking specifically of men or just men and women, that it's not good for them to be alone. But I'm just quoting that verse essentially to give you guys some context into the subject of singleness that we're addressing tonight. And so, once the Lord stated that it wasn't good for man to be alone, he said himself that he would create for him a helper. Thus came Eve. She came into the picture, and we see we see how Adam reacts, to the fact of being joined now to Eve, and it's a whole change of dynamic. And obviously, for him being the first man ever created, I can imagine the surprise. I can imagine the excitement and the astonishment at finding someone who is just like him, but at the same time different. So he found his better half basically in that garden, and we can see also through his comments the joy and the love that he expressed towards his better half. Now, just to pause and rewind a little bit to the fact that Adam was in the garden by himself. In Genesis, if you study a little bit deeper, you'll see that the Lord, when he placed Adam into the garden, he gave him dominion over all things. Already from the start, Adam had responsibility. So he was appointed to name all of the creatures of the earth and things of that nature. But God basically gave man responsibility and a task. So while he was there, he was preoccupied by accomplishing his purpose, accomplishing a mission and a responsibility that was destined to him in that moment. And I think it's important for us to understand when addressing the topic of singleness is that all of us, we have some sort of a calling, we have some sort of a responsibility and task that has been appointed to us, that if we are too inclined or too eager to hop into a relationship, to include a relationship in that equation, it could jeopardize basically the responsibility or the mission that was appointed to us. Now, obviously, Adam being a unique case where he didn't even know of the existence or the possibility of having a relationship with a better half, that it's not even an idea that crossed his mind. But for us now, obviously, men and women have existed for centuries and generations, that it is a concept that has allowed our generation, has allowed our society to expand, develop, and grow, that it is something that we now are seeking for ourselves and pursuing for ourselves, and all noble things and good things to have and to pursue. However, it is important for us to note that when it comes to our purpose, when it comes to the responsibilities, especially appointed by the Lord, it's important to not lose sight and not lose focus of those objectives, because adding a relationship could definitely jeopardize all of that. Now, another thing, when Adam was alone in the garden, he was given instructions in terms of how to live, in terms of how to operate in that space that was given to him. So, if you read a little bit in Genesis, you will see that the Lord starts to speak about the forbidden tree. He gave that instruction specifically to Adam, saying, "You can eat of all the fruits, you can eat of everything that is edible, I guess, that I have placed in this garden. However, when it comes to the tree of knowledge, you shall not eat of that fruit, because the day you do, you will surely die." So that instruction was given to Adam while he was alone in the garden, while he had no other dependent, so to speak. He was not in a relationship with a woman. He did not have kids. He did not have any of that. And so those instructions came to him before the relationship became a thing. And I think it's going to be key for later while I'll continue to develop my points. But please note of the fact that the Lord first gave that instruction or that rule, those boundaries to Adam long before the concept of relationship became a thing. All right. So, going back to the topic of singleness, it's important for us to understand that we all have a God given purpose, we all have God given responsibilities. And it's important for us to become aware of those things before we start um, eagerly pursuing relationships. Because once we start to mix the two and to mix them in an unhealthy way, that's where we can fall out. So now moving forward, um, Adam is in a relationship and he found his better half, etc., etc. They had their kids, they started a family, blah blah blah. Now, I want to fast forward a little bit further to the realities that we face today in 2025. Now, I think it's no secret that for quite some time, for quite a few years already, the whole concept of dating, especially, has been very prevalent in our circles, very um, advertised and pushed forward in our societies, where everyone is kind of longing for a relationship with someone, but oftentimes for the wrong reasons. Now, we see a lot of the mushy gushy type of relationships in movies and TV shows, and everyone who um, aspires to a relationship believes that essentially that's what they're settling for. That's what a relationship is all about. Going out on dates, uh, calling each other cute names. Having our moments, but it's a lot deeper than that. When we look at the pillars of society, which is built pretty much through marriage and the institution of the family, we see the importance of the role of a father, a present mother, a loving husband and wife, and children who follow into the teachings, the guidelines, the instructions of their parents. Obviously, having themselves a pretty strong foundation about their morals, about their values, and such, that they now instill that in their offsprings. And that's what contributes to long lasting, strong, and healthy societies. But in 2025, I feel as though it has not been the motive for a lot of people. It has not been the drive or even the interest of some folks when thinking about relationships. A lot of them are thinking about relationships in the short term gains, also the emotions that it evokes in being in a new relationship and discovering someone for the first time. And all those feelings are normal, they're natural. When you're drawn towards someone and they evoke some sort of feeling towards you in such a way, it is a very natural and human response. However, if it becomes our motive, if it becomes our end all be all, it is only then that we realize how relationships can be shallow. And so I think my preoccupation with addressing this theme during this month is so that I can equip you guys with the right questions, the right thought process with regards to how to approach relationships, and not be so fixated on the superficial aspects of it, but to actually pursue it in a God fearing, God honoring way that is not only going to bring you joy, but also fulfillment, right? Because we see it time and time again in social media, in the real world around us as well. The downsides of being in a relationship with the wrong person, what it can do to someone. It can be very destructive, very dangerous. And so my only desire in addressing these subjects is to equip you guys to avoid those type of scenarios. So, singleness, is it a blessing? Is it a curse? It's a big question to ask, just because a lot of people tend to kind of whine about the fact that, man, I've been looking for a decent relationship for years and I haven't been able to, or there aren't any good options in my surroundings, yada yada yada. Um, and I don't think anyone should really rush a relationship for the sake of not wanting to be single or not wanting to be lonely anymore. Um, it's important to understand, like I said, the importance of being in a relationship with the right person, and those things you don't want to rush them. If you really want to enjoy relationship for all it has to offer, you do not want to rush that. Now, what are the things that we have observed through Adam in his singleness that helped contribute, in a sense, to his future relationship? The fact that he walked in his purpose while he was being single. So, when you have responsibility, when you have something that is preoccupying you, or not preoccupying you, but rather keeping you busy, um, sometimes it's even difficult to make time for relationships. And I know a lot of people struggle with mixing relationship and work, or relationship and career, relationship and callings. So I think when you have that already discovered for yourself and you're actively pursuing it, being single is a very sacred period of time where you can ask yourself the big questions. Am I able to actively pursue a relationship while doing both? Right? Because a lot of people, whether they want to admit it or not, are incapable of juggling both. And so now it becomes frustrating, especially for the person in which you are in a relationship with, because they want to spend time with you, they want to talk to you, they want to see you, they want to be around you, but they're unable to get that out of you because you're so busy, because whether it be your ministry, your career, your profession is asking so much of your time that you're unable to contribute to the relationship. You're unable to make it flourish. And so I think it's important for us, when we are single, when we are in that period, to ask ourselves the right questions in terms of, how do I want to approach relationships while I'm single? How do I want to approach relationships? Am I able to juggle both with the kind of calling, the kind of profession, the kind of hobby, or you know whatever the case may be that I'm dealing with? Am I able to do it all? And once you ask yourself those questions and are able to answer truthfully, that's when some of the things about the kind of relationship you want to pursue is going to be revealed to you. Now, second to that question, I would say you got to ask yourself about the kind of person you want to be with. And this is a crucial question, and I'm particularly going to be pulling the ears of men, that you need to do that exercise on your free time. You need to ask yourself, what do I want in a woman? And similarly to the ladies, you need to ask yourselves these questions. What do I want in a man? And I'm not talking about the superficial stuff and the things that fade over time, right? Because I want someone tall, I want someone built, I want someone um, who works out, and whatever the case may be. It's it's nice on paper, but listen, we all gain weight, we all lose weight, we lose hair, we lose uh, a bit of our shine over the years. And so it's very important to ask ourselves the right questions about the things that are absolutely crucial to the future partner that I will seek to invest a relationship with. I have particularly done this exercise years ago, where I put on paper everything that came to mind in terms of what I would like in my ideal partner. Now, obviously, like, even though you're writing those stuff down, you're not gonna find someone who has every single item on that list. So this is where you're going to divide that list into two categories. First one being my non-negotiables. Non-negotiables, pretty straightforward. It's, you either have this or you don't. And if you don't, well, it's a deal breaker for me. And the negotiables are the things that, even though it's not on the list, or even though it appears on the list but not to the degree that you wanted it, like, you can live with it. For example, I like someone with blue eyes. This guy has brown eyes. It's not the end of the world. I can live with this, especially if all the non-negotiables are checked out. So that's the important distinction, right? Don't compromise the items that you have listed in your negotiable for the non-negotiables, right? The non-negotiable, it's you could be the prettiest woman in the world. You could be the handsomest man in the world. If you don't check out these boxes, it's a done deal. And you need to be firm on that list that you build for yourselves because, mind you, this is the person you are aspiring to pursue a relationship with, and you want to make sure that it's someone worth investing in, right? You don't want to be robbed of your own time. You also don't want to be robbed of your own resources in terms of emotional, mental investment, and things of that nature. So make sure you pick wisely. Make sure you're also very clear about what it is that you want, what it is that you're pursuing, and making sure you're not compromising that for anything. So, those are some questions to ask yourselves while you are single. And while you're single, I mean, it doesn't mean that you can't meet people along the way, whether it be at work, whether it be at the gym, whether it be at the park. We meet people on a daily basis. And so, I think being single, meaning you're not in an active relationship with someone, um, doesn't mean that you can't show interest in someone, right? You can talk to someone without necessarily being in a relationship with them and getting to know them lightly and build that relationship over time if it's something that they are open to and that you're also open to. I want to also address a particular point in the Bible that is mentioned in the Bible, and that is with regards to something that the Apostle Paul had to say. The Apostle Paul had something to say with regards to relationships and more specifically to marriage. I forget exactly the passage. I'm inclined to say it's in Romans. I could be wrong. Um, or maybe it's Corinthians. Anyways, I will look that up and we'll definitely write it down once I post this stream online. But basically, Paul was commenting with regards to relationships, and he was urging the Christians to basically do like he was doing, and that is to abstain himself from relationships. Now, those are some harsh words, some pretty strong words. Definitely don't take it lightly. And I wanted to expand a little bit on what he had to say, just so that I can eliminate some of the misconceptions. When Paul was saying, I wish you were all like me and you were basically celibate and chose to be celibate, it was solely because he wanted the believers to really dedicate themselves to the ministry, to the Great Commission, the mission that we all have, which is to make of all nations disciples. And he knows the responsibilities that comes with being a married man or a married woman. And your duty would now shift from, you know, God is your priority to now your husband or your wife becomes a priority. And Paul kind of comments on that, saying that because now your 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 number one devotion would be towards your spouse, um, your interests kind of become a little bit divided in terms of how much time you invest in your faith or how much time you invest in ministry, in sharing the gospel, in making disciples and things of that nature. And there's a lot more ties, I guess, with regards to being married, being in a relationship, than being celibate. It is true that when you're single, it is a great opportunity for you to spend as much time as possible in the Word, to grow in your faith, to seek the Lord, knowing that you don't have the ties of a relationship that is eating up some of that time that you would normally have dedicated to being in the Word. And I don't want you guys also to take it the wrong way that being in a relationship robs you of spending time with the Lord. Absolutely not. I think, especially if you are a couple that are both professing Christians, I think you would both share the same kind of passion, the same kind of devotion to your faith, that you would not compromise it for the sake of being in a relationship with each other, that you would still actively seek to do the will of God, and that starts with continuously growing with Him. But I think it's important to understand that, especially in the context of marriage, like, man, you have a wife, everything that you're about to do in terms of, like, if you want to go out, if you want to meet with a certain group of people, if you want to even go on a missions trip, things of that nature, um, you can't just pack your bags and leave the next morning without saying a thing. Now you have to take your wife or your husband into consideration. You need to let them know. They need to also be okay with it. There's a lot of factors that come into play, and I know this is going to open a whole different subject of conversation amongst some people with regards to, well, if if he if he's in a relationship with me, or if she's in a relationship with me, they should know that, I got ministry that comes first, and blah blah blah. They should be able to adapt and adjust. um, that's a whole topic that I want to address, maybe in a different segment. But all this to say that, like, I wanted to really draw in a little bit on what Paul had to say and make sure that it's not misunderstood. Paul isn't saying that, everyone, if you want to be do right by God, you should be single, because it would kind of contradict what the Lord said about it is not good for man to be alone, and especially when he joined Adam and Eve, he said that let no man separate what God has united. So um, God would not unite someone to another that he does not think it would come to some sort of a benefit or some sort of a positive outcome. And that is why choosing your partner wisely is crucial, and also ensuring that is someone that falls in line with your morals, falls in line with your values, and those are the things that you discover throughout your singleness. The other point I wanted to spend time on is you got to also understand yourself. A lot of people are eager to jump into relationships, and they're still trying to figure themselves out. They're still unsure of their approach towards relationship, how they behave in relationships, and also understanding some of the things that they might be struggling with, they might be discovering about themselves. And you got to give yourself some time to build all of that, right? And so if you haven't figured yourself out and now you want to bring a whole different and complex, equally complex person into the equation, man, you're in for a rough ride. A very, very rough ride. I mean, there's a lot of people I know, right, that I spoke with, that I fellowshipped with, who struggled tremendously in relationships just because they were never in sync, they were never understanding of each other, and how they interacted with one another. That was mainly because at the first stages of them getting to know each other, it was just basically fueled on emotions and the giddy feelings that you get from finding someone to your liking for whatever reason, but never actually taking the time to actively getting to know them and understand them. Now, for ourselves, it's very important. We need to understand ourselves. We need to understand what are our likes, our dislikes, our good and bad habits, the things that we value in relationships, the things that we despise, um, things of that nature. We need to spend time with ourselves as well to understand where it is that we're coming from, what is it that we we value and want to put on a pedestal. And once we have a greater understanding of that, then bringing another person into the equation becomes a lot easier. And mind you, you can never really 110% fully know yourself, but I think you can know yourself quite enough that once you have that confidence that with who you are currently, you would see yourself thrive in a relationship, then you can start to open yourself to that idea. But definitely don't jump the gun. There's a lot of people who want relationships while they're still maturing, they're still growing, they're still trying to understand the world in which they live in. And so it's not something that you want to rush, because people are very complex, people are very unpredictable, can be very frustrating to interact with people. I mean, friendships alone can be so hard to maintain and so hard to navigate through. And now you want to bring in a romantic relationship into that play. That's where things become complicated. So I wanted to make sure everyone understands that as well. Now, I think moving to the whole idea of singleness being a blessing or a curse, it's very important for us to ask ourselves that question because I think with the way that our society today has portrayed singleness, it's almost something that you want to avoid. And I would say that men are teased about it just as much as women. Um, you know, in some of the jokes that tend to surface, people are oftentimes going to reference, man, you have no one in your life, like you have no girls, or you don't even have a man, or you're not even able to retain a man, things of that nature. And I would say that like let's as much as possible refrain from such comments because of the toxicity that it brings forth, and also it can it can entice you to pursue relationships for the wrong reason, and so you definitely want to avoid that. Um, but now, is being single a curse? Absolutely not. I mean, I definitely gave you sufficient reasons to be proactive in your singleness and to also value it. And it's definitely not an exhaustive list. I think there's a lot more to that that I can add on to it. I mean, being single is a lot cheaper than being in a relationship, I will say. Um, so there's definitely those perks I would say to being single, but not to say that like paying for dates or paying for your significant other is a bad thing. But some people might value their money to a degree where they're not willing to compromise it for the sake of a relationship. To each their own, really. But I think as believers, it's important to understand like what are we trying to get out of a relationship, right? And if you don't have the answer to that, then being single is actually a very good thing. You don't want to put yourself in a situation that is going to add more turmoil to your life, turmoil to the life of the person in which you're in a relationship with, and ultimately steer you off course of your God given purpose, your God given responsibilities. So it's very crucial to be wise in that approach. And that's why, like, for me personally, I would not, I would not encourage high schoolers to pursue a relationship. Why? Because half of them are going through high school trying to figure themselves out. And I think for a lot of people, they don't even know who they are, even after high school, even after university. So to promote this idea of like pursuing a relationship at that age, unfortunately, they don't all have the level of maturity and understanding with regards to how to approach relationships that I personally would not condone it. However, it's not necessarily a bad thing if you know what it is that you want, if you're mature about it. I mean, I've seen a lot of people that have known each other since high school. They've been in a relationship since high school. They are happily married, they have children, and life is good for them. And that's amazing, you know? Um, However, if it just came down to me and my own personal opinion, that would be my approach to it. Even though, like, you might draw some interest towards some people in your surroundings in high school, everyone is still developing there. Everyone's still growing, so no one is a finished product when they're in high school. Some obviously peak sooner than others in the sense that like what you saw in high school is basically who they turn out to be. Um, However, for the most part, I would say a lot of them are still developing or still growing as the years go by after high school, and so it would be more beneficial, I would say, for those folks to wait after high school when they are also developing themselves and getting to know themselves to now seek to invest in a relationship. Um, I mentioned the importance of understanding your God-given purpose, your God-given responsibilities. As Christians, we all have a calling of some sort. We all have something that the Lord has placed in us to put to use for His glory, for His kingdom. And if we don't have a general understanding of what that is, um, we might end up compromising our relationship with the Lord for a simple relationship with a man or a woman. And so, as Christians, if we value our relationship with God, that is definitely not something that you want to sacrifice for someone that you're probably going to be dating for a few months, and in the end just realize that it didn't really work out. And a lot of us, we've made some mistakes. A lot of us, we've gone astray, and we're not perfect. I'm definitely not perfect. I've made my fair share of mistakes in that field, and I don't want you guys to take my message of today as, well, he got it all figured out, since the jump, and he's been doing it right since the beginning. Absolutely not. Everything I'm sharing to you is based off experience, off of my mistakes, off of mistakes of others, off of the wisdom that I've also picked up from others, and I'm just imparting that onto you guys for you to reflect and meditate upon and see how it can be impactful in your own lives. And so you take everything that I have to say with a grain of salt, because I am definitely not an expert in that field. However, I have seen my fair share of circumstances to be comfortable enough and confident enough to speak on the subject. Now, when it comes to celibacy, I will say that it is a topic that even for myself, I have a little bit of difficulty understanding thoroughly, for the simple fact that I don't think I have the gift of celibacy. I do aspire to relationship. I do aspire to starting and building a family one day. And so that idea has never crossed my mind. And even the people that I know who are single, um, they also express the fact that, like, it's not that they want to be single, it's just that they haven't found anyone, and that's kind of the situation that they're in. But if it was up to them, they would definitely would rather be in a relationship with someone. So it's important to understand some of the gifts that God has given us, some of the responsibilities, like I said, that God has given us. And even Paul himself, when he speaks of celibacy, um, he also comments on the fact that both being single and being in a relationship is a gift from God. It is a good thing to be either celibate or to be married. Now, obviously, our society has a different opinion with regards to that, in being that they will put on a pedestal, I would say, um, some things over others, that, like, being single is almost frowned upon, and a lot of people get shamed for being single for a certain period of time. And I've never understood the reasoning behind it. uh, there's a lot of people who actively struggle, just to find someone that has a genuine liking in them, and so it's not always a fault of their own, but it's just with regards to the people that they have been dealing with recently. Or some people are just very picky with what they want and having a hard time finding what it is that they want. And I will say, like I was mentioning earlier, if you do make a list for yourselves about what are some of the things that you absolutely need to find present in your future relationship, um, to be mindful of those two lists, those two categories, the negotiables and non-negotiables, because a lot of people are spending years and years and years going from one man or one woman to another, because their expectations are either unrealistic, or they're not able to settle down with someone who meets even the criteria that they have listed. So all this to say that, like, I don't think we should tackle the topic of singleness in a negative way, meaning that it is not it is not a bad thing to be single. In fact, I would much encourage people who are not in a relationship to embrace that season in which you're in, and to approach it wisely. to ask yourself the right question while you can, while you have no ties to no one. Ask yourself the right question. Even if you have someone who has communicated interest in you, as long as you're not in a relationship, and even like if you guys are dating, there's nothing that is really tying you down to that person until you're really married to one another. But while you are single, as much as possible, like spend that time asking all the right questions to yourself, to the person of interest, to God especially. Man, the the moment I started to embrace the season of singleness that I was in, um, I made a decision to implicate God from the get go and be like, God, this is what I want, this is what I aspire to, but I need your wisdom, I need your spirit to help shape my desires, my intentions with regards to the future relationship that I'm pursuing, so that when I do find the right person, we can honor you together, we can serve you together, and I can truly rejoice in this relationship. So, including God while you're in your singleness is definitely a huge bonus point for us Christians when we're able to put that into practice actively. The benefits that we're going to reap in the end is going to be tremendous. So, like I said, I think the topic of singleness, the topic of romantic relationships in general, is very extensive, and there's so much more to say. But I think for tonight, I've covered more than enough to give you some material to reflect upon and ask yourselves the questions whether it's something that you put in practice actively in your own lives, or are these things that you agree with, things that you disagree with, whatever the case may be. I will leave you that time to reflect and review that content and material for yourselves, and figure out what your approach towards the subject of singleness will be moving forward. So, with that being said, that is all I have for tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I wish you guys a good rest of your evening, a great start to your week, and God bless.